Leo and little Annabelle. Annabelle, they're going to sing a song on Russian. It's about the sailing boat. We like sailing boat in this world, and we can be guarded by Jesus. And next song we're going to sing me, Anna, and Tana. It's an old Ukrainian song. We're going to remember those old days. It's a prayer, translation like a prayer. We come before God and we pray to God that God protect us, help us, and give us peace.
So Better at presenting this because it originates from him in the health department, but he is gone. I tried my best to get my sister involved in it, but she did her best to get out of it. So here I am. She's going to do it next year, though, right? We will have her do it next year for sure. So we're very happy that our church, as one of the tenets of the church, right? There's a 3-pegged stool. What does Ellen White say? Health reform should be one of the legs. Supporting the faith. So it's good that our church every year around this time has a focus on a health message. And this health message is pretty much going throughout the world. So I encourage everybody in their time off today, listen to some of the YouTubes from other churches. Maybe there's something in Ukraine. I know there's something in Roanoke. Maybe there's something in Northern California, Sacramento area, and see what different flavors we can get from the health messages put out by our church here on this day. So the topic that we will be going through today is partnering with the rhythm of your being. Does anyone know, do they have a rhythm within them? Is there a rhythm that we have? So a rhythm is something that can only be determined if you can follow time, correct? And time is really just nothing more than a figment of the imagination of a human being. Because if there is not a sentient, thoughtful human being thinking about time really doesn't exist, right? Does time exist if there's nobody there to actually see what's going on? Not really, you know? If there is not a baby that grows to an adult and then the adult grows into an elderly person and passes away, there is no understanding of that passage of time, correct? So time is something that's distinctly human. Time is something that humans follow. Since the very ancient times, we've been looking at what? The spring, the summer, the fall, the winter. We've been seeing the cycles. We've been seeing the cycles of the sun. You get more sun at certain times of the year, less sun. That's where you get the seasons from. So time is a very, very important thing. That is a very human thing. And humans are built around a rhythm of the world around them. And today I would like all of us to think about, within us, there are also very, very many complicated rhythms. What are these complicated rhythms? One up here is the heart. The heart has a rhythm. The heart beats 50 to 80 times every minute for hours and hours, for days, weeks, months, years, until eventually the rhythm stops, right? The lungs, we all breathe at a certain rate. We breathe 8 to 15 breaths a minute. Sometimes more when we're exercising, sometimes less, but there are rhythms inside you and me that we don't even really think about. The way our liver works is based off of a rhythm. Our GI tract, our intestinal tract, is based off of a time-based rhythm. Our reproductive system, isn't that rhythmic? There are only certain times a month that maybe a baby can be conceived. That is all based off of a rhythm. So whether we realize it or not, we are all time-based creatures. And all the systems within us are intricately working together. And if they are not in good balance, and we see this a lot like in reproductive health, if many of the other hormones are all out of whack, the normal rhythm of reproduction doesn't happen. And the way we can definitely be healthier is by focusing on getting our rhythm in tune with the way God wanted us to originally be. So one of the key things in our rhythm is our sleep-wake cycle. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. We'll see which ways the other churches want to go with this. But sleep is a very interesting thing. And sleep is something that I think a lot of people in this day and age, we're more than happy to ignore. Right? Back in the old times when the sun set, you went to sleep. You didn't have halogenated lights, you didn't have LEDs, you went to sleep. Maybe you had a candle or something else like that. You might read a little bit and you went to sleep. And when the sun came back, you woke up. But in this day and age, we stay up late, we wake up early, we feel like sleep can be cut shorter and shorter because is it really needed? Is it really needed? Jeremiah 31:25 says, "For I will satisfy the weary soul, and every languishing soul I will replenish. At this I awoke and looked, and my sleep was pleasant to me." Have any of you woken up recently and said, wow, I slept good? Raise your hand among us. Who's had a good night's sleep recently? Sister Maria, Brother Eric. Very good. Sometimes I wake up and I say, wow, I had a good night's sleep. Sometimes I feel like the sleep has traumatized me, I got beat up over the night and I felt worse off when I woke up than when I went to bed. Now, scientists say humans spend how much of their time asleep? 1/3 of our life, we are unconscious. Think about how much more effective we could be if we could cut that in half. What if we only spent 1/4 of our life asleep? 3/4 of our lives, we could do everything we wanted to do. Why is it that we have to spend a whole 1/3 of our life laying in a bed wasting our time? And that's how a lot of people think. I viewed it as a waste for much of my life. Sleep is a waste. And I got very, very good at being sleep deprived. I was able to cut my sleep back till around 4 to 5 hours a night. And I could do very, very well. But if I got less than 5 hours, 4 hours and 30 minutes, I got all kinds of bad situations happening. And this was mainly when I was in school. I was studying. So I would study during the day. I would study late into the night. I'd wake up early in the morning and study before school. Then go to school. And it would continue every day, studying. And now as I look back, I wonder if I had done less studying and more sleeping, would I have actually done better? I think I would have. In fact, I cut my sleep so short that I would have all kinds of sleep hallucinations, which are noted in people who have such slow amounts of sleep, they start dreaming before they're even really asleep yet, and you would have all kinds of strange hallucinations, and I realized then that what I was doing was not very safe. So I said, okay, 4 hours is too short, I'll pull it back to 5, the sleep hallucinations stopped, life was good. And I kept on going at 5 hours. So I knew where my limits were, where I needed to survive. But that is not the way that God designed us to sleep. Even still today, just a couple weeks ago, my mom asked me, did you work last night? I said, yes. She said, well, you're going to take a nap, right? I'm like, no, I'm not going to take a nap. She's like, well, you need to take a nap. Sleep is good. And I said, Mom, I'll sleep when I die. And they hate it when I say that, and I love to say it. I'll sleep when I die. But the truth is, the more sleep we take away from ourselves, it does hasten the day of our death. And science has proven that. The less sleep you have, the day of your final sleep will come sooner. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And we will also talk a little bit about how the pen of inspiration, Sister Ellen White, was really decades to almost a century ahead of what our current thoughts are on sleep. So, why do we waste 1/3 of our life in bed sleeping? What is the point? First of all, what is sleep? So sleep is a reversible state where you have reduced responsiveness to the world around you. Have you ever tried to wake a sleeping person up? It can be hard. Sometimes just a tap. My wife, she'll wake to almost anything. But me, the kids are rocking around in bed, I'm not going to wake up. I'm not going to wake up. So some people are harder, some people are easier, and it depends on where they are in their sleep cycle. See, we have a cycle of sleep, but within sleep we have multiple cycles that occur, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about it. So when we're sleeping, we have a state of reduced responsiveness, reduced motor activity, which means we don't move. We may roll over, do some minimal things, but we're not walking around in our sleep, very rarely. Some people do in strange situations. And also, our metabolism goes down as well, meaning all the cells in our body, they don't need so much energy. So we kind of go into a state of hibernation. And the sleep in the human being is rhythmic. It's based on a 24-hour cycle. Okay, this 24-hour cycle where we sleep in the night and in the daytime we are awake. Now when you do go to sleep, your sleep has stages. and I have them I have them listed here. Some of them have another stage, N4, but not all have N4. But in stage N1, this is a state where you think you're awake, but really you're asleep. Have you all had that? I've had it where I'm trying to sleep at night and I'm thinking and I'm like, oh, I'm so frustrated. It's 3 in the morning. I have to sleep. I have to sleep. And then it turns out you're somewhere in there. You faded out. And in many situations, a person woken up from N1 sleep, you ask them, were you sleeping? And they would say, no, I was trying to fall asleep, but I couldn't. So they don't realize that they're sleeping yet, but it's the earliest stage. And it's the easiest stage to wake up a person from. Then you spend the majority of your night in N2. In N2, your brain waves start to slow down. They're really fine when you're awake, but when you're in N2, they slow down, they get bigger. And you spend about half of your night in that stage. N3 is the deepest level of sleep. N3, you spend probably about 20 to 40 minutes in N3. And usually you spend this in the beginning of the night, okay? So you go to sleep, you'll hit N1, 2, and then almost immediately you drop to your deepest levels of sleep. And you'll stay there for a period of time. Most people, for me, that's around 20 to 40 minutes every night. And then you start to arise out of the deep level of sleep into rapid eye movement. REM, R-E-M, rapid eye movement. And this is a strange type of sleep that sometimes when you look at your kids, you're going to see their eyes or your spouse fluttering underneath their eyelids. Their eyelids are closed, but their eyes are fluttering. They may be twitching a little bit. And this is when people dream. And their brain waves are actually almost normal to the awake state, but they are asleep. In fact, the only things moving in REM are their eyes and their diaphragm. All the other muscles tend to be very, very relaxed, or they say paralyzed. So that way, most people cannot act out their dreams. If they're running from the cops in their dream, you don't want them running right out the door, right? So this is the stage of sleep where scientists believe that your mind is categorizing the day. It's taking the memories of the day, it's storing them, it's moving them around, it's trimming memories, so it's trimming nerve endings of things that are not important. Memories that aren't important are getting trashed, memories that are important are getting saved. You have immense brain activity, almost like daytime activity while you are in this stage of sleep. And what's interesting here, when you look at our stages, you start awake, you go down all the way to stage 3 or 4, and then boom, you go back up. You go back up, you hit REM, then you go back down. You go back up and down, all night long. And the thing is, as the night goes on, the depths are less, and you tend to spend more and more time at the higher levels of sleep, the lighter levels of sleep. To the point where in the end, in the morning, you're going to spend more time in REM, and that's why a lot of people remember their dreams, because they were in REM sleep. But if you're like Sister Maria, you may not remember your dreams. I don't always remember mine either. So most people will dream the most in the morning, 4, 5, 6 o'clock, based off of when their wake-up time is. So not only do we sleep once in 24 hours for a period of time, but when we are asleep, we go up and down in a rhythmic fashion. And isn't it interesting that in the first few hours of sleep, your deepest sleep is in the beginning? So can you imagine if you drastically cut parts of your sleep short? Either you wake up very early, you're missing out on a lot of that REM at the end, or if you're going to sleep very, very late, some of those deep depths may be missed or cut short. So if we drastically change our sleep and wake, we can drastically affect how restful our night has been.
What about people who work at night?
Oh, that's a good point. So people who work at night, they will flip their cycle. But it depends. If they work one night here or there, they're going to stay on the same cycle, and when they're working, they're just exhausted. But if they work only on nights, the whole REM cycle flips. That's why when they want to switch back to daytime, normal daytime stuff, they don't feel good for about 3 to 4 days until everything switches back. So it's interesting because we're going to talk about my sleep cycles because I sleep with an iWatch. And I found a lot of insight in this because if you have an iWatch, I recommend, or any kind of smartwatch, charge it before you go to bed and sleep with your watch on. Sleep with your watch on. It will be a blessing, or it might be alarming at how good your sleep is, or how bad it might be. So here are my sleep cycles from a few days ago. I have December 31st, I have January 13th, and I have October. And I picked examples of good and bad times. So here in December, you see I have nice deep levels of sleep down here. And then that light blue is all the REM I had at the end of the day. That was 7 hours and about 30 minutes of sleep. My core, which Apple calls core, is really the deep sleep, was deep sleep was 37 minutes, so that's right around the 20 to 40 minutes. My REM was about 1 hour and 50 minutes, so almost 2 hours, which is good. Now we look at the next day, January 18th. And as you see, I slept a little bit less. I had some broken sleep. Did you see the depth? I did hit the deep for about 1 hour. Actually longer than the other one. I wonder why. And then the REM, though, was nowhere near as long. Here was almost 2 hours. Here my REM at the end of the night, it was only 36 minutes. So something was messing up my sleep. And then the last one here, it was the night I worked. Okay? So I didn't go to bed till about 3, and then I got woken up. So those times, that orange at the top, that red at the top, is times I went to go do things. I got woken up, I got taken here and there, I had trouble falling asleep. So you see, I only had 36 minutes of deep sleep, so somehow they forced it in there, and only 27 minutes of REM. So it's interesting because you can see on your own smartwatch, you can follow how your sleep is. And you can have an idea, you know what, am I abusing the laws of health with my lifestyle? Is staying up late at night and watching movies all night, is that something that's really going to help me out? Is that partnering me with the rhythm that God has set for me? So now when I wake up in the morning and I feel like, I didn't sleep that well, I look at my watch and I say, well, that explains it. Yeah, I've been up since I was up till 3 in the morning, and then I, slept a little bit here and there, broken sleep. Of course you're not going to feel well. How important is regularity in sleeping? Ellen White in page 205 says the importance of regularity in the time for eating and sleeping should not be overlooked. Since the work of building up the body takes place during the hours of rest, it is essential, especially in youth, that sleep is regular and abundant. So you need to have enough, and it needs to be regular. Okay? So what happens when we sleep? Ellen White already said, there is a body restoration, right? And scientists in the modern era, they agree. They agree there is a body restoration. There's muscle growth, there's tissue regeneration. All of those things occur when you're asleep. So when you're sore, you've had a hard day, that's when the body starts to repair itself. But then there's also something even more interesting. There is repair in the brain. Okay? So during the day, we have waste products building up in our brain all day from all the metabolic activity, all the thinking, the nerves are firing. And as the nerves firing, all the exhaust from your brain just builds up in the brain all day. And that exhaust, you could say, they call it adenosine, ADP, that brings on the feeling of fatigue. You get to feel more and more tired. And as you feel more and more tired, the brain pushes you, hey, it's time to go to sleep. You drift off to sleep, and then you have the cleaning of the brain. That's why I have a power washer up here. The brain cleans itself when it's asleep. So that's why we spend a third of our life in there. A third of our life in sleep. If we did not stay asleep, we're not cleaning our brain. And if we're not cleaning our brain, then we're not learning. We're not improving our cognitive function. We're not improving our memory. Now, why is it important to improve our cognitive function or our memory? We have all kinds of diseases in our life, in our world, all kinds of dementias. How much of these are tied to lack of proper sleep? Do we know? I think we don't fully understand it. So here's a nice article from the NIH, how the brain may flush out toxins while we sleep. And pretty much what they say in this paragraph is they say that while the brain is sleeping, certain cells shrink to allow highways or pathways where all the waste products in the brain get flushed out. So it's an important time where actually the brain changes its physical structure to flush out all the waste products of your brain, all the cells in your brain. And they actually did a study with beta amyloid protein, which is the key protein in Alzheimer's. And they injected this protein into the brains of mice. And they noticed that when the mice were asleep, the protein would get cleared out, but when the mice were awake, the protein would be staying there much longer. So that suggests that when you are sleeping, you are clearing out all those bad proteins that cause Alzheimer's and dementia. But if you're sleep deprived or you're not sleeping appropriately, all these waste products, they're harder to remove in our brain. And when they're harder to remove in our brain, then we may be more prone to some of these diseases, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. So as you can see here in this next picture, here's the asleep brain in the mouse. And there are spaces in the cell where the waste products, or spaces around the cells where the waste products are able to be drained out into the cerebrospinal fluid and washed away. And then when the brain is awake, those pathways close. So I did a little study, a little research. Can sleep problems predict cognitive decline, or let's say you can say dementia in elderly adults? And they found that yes, indeed, people with sleep problems start to have earlier onset dementia. And the older you get and the more demented you get, the harder it is really to sleep. So that's why elderly people have a lot of difficulty sleeping. Okay? And then just a little bit more looking, poor sleep quality, dementia status, and their association with all-cause mortality among older U.S. adults. Poor sleep is directly related to earlier death and earlier onset dementia. Another article, sleep disorders and mortality, meaning death. They did a study in Canada, and they confirmed that there's a relationship between sleep disorders, people who do not sleep well, they are more likely to die, from all causes. Car accidents, more likely to die from heart problems, strokes, etc. So there is an association. If you are not sleeping well, you are more likely to die. So then the question is, okay, sleep is important. How much sleep is important? If 7 hours is good, is 12 hours better? So this Chinese study here, they looked at sleep duration, how long the sleep was, and its relation to death, all-cause mortality in the Chinese elderly patients. They found that when you exceed 9 hours of sleep, your mortality or your risks of or hazards for death increases. So sleeping 12 or 14 hours doesn't make you better, doesn't make you safer. About 7 to 8 hours is all they recommend. So this is not like crazy recommendations. 7 to 8 hours of sleep, that has been shown to be the biggest benefit for your health. Less than 7 hours, you have increased risks of death. Greater than 9 hours, increased risks of death. So, brothers and sisters, if sleep is so important, how do we repair our broken sleep clocks? There's the rhythm that we talked about, a circadian rhythm. And this is the rhythm that every human being has. This rhythm is on a 24.2-hour clock. Sometimes I wonder if we ever get into going to Mars, how will this rhythm work? I never thought about that. Because this rhythm is totally tied to the earth. Totally tied. In a 24-hour day, this rhythm is tied to the earth. So 24.2 hours. And this rhythm is the rhythm that tells us when to go to sleep. So the clock is a 24-hour clock. It's present throughout your body. This is the master program. This is like the thing that tells your body when it's time to wake and when it's time to go to sleep. And it keeps all the organs tied together working on this rhythm. And what does this rhythm do? It drives your metabolism, your temperature, the secretion of hormones, even your immune system. So if you're not sleeping well, you're not abiding by your circadian rhythm, you might have immune problems. You might be more likely to be sick. You may have problems with hormone secretion, reproduction. And the center of this clock is up in your brain in an area called the hypothalamus, and that's where lots of hormones are produced. And the clock responds really to what? One of the biggest drivers of your clock. There's two big drivers. One is light. Okay? When it's light, and the light shines on the photoreceptors of your eyes, your mind says, whoa, it must be time to wake up. However, you can run into a problem because what if it's late at night, 11 o'clock at night, and you're surfing the phone or on Facebook and you have that bright white light in your eyes? That light is telling your brain, I'm not going to sleep. And then the sleep-wake cycle is being disrupted. So how we regulate light is very, very important. And this is how our brain keeps in touch with where we are in the world. And for an example, when our brothers and sisters came from Russia, right, it took a long time for the circadian rhythm to switch back because their night and day is different than our night and day. So it's a difficult thing when you disrupt that. And anyone who's traveled in different time zones, they realize the cost of changing your circadian rhythm. It's a rough adjustment. So you have light stimulation, and that creates a whole cascade of changes in your brain to release various hormones. So when it gets late at night and you're not on your phone and it's getting dark, then you will have the release of melatonin and other hormones that start to get you nice and sleepy. Now another thing, and Ellen White brought this up a lot, the regulation of sleep, regulation of eating. Those two things are tied very closely together. Your food intake also drives and has an effect on your circadian rhythm. So not only does light, but also when you eat, to the point of when you go out into a different time zone, like travel to Europe or travel to Australia, you get hungry at different times. You're not used to the local time. So all of your body, your digestion, everything is tied together with your circadian rhythm. But there are things, irregular meal times, if you eat randomly during times of the day, if you're highly stressed, if you've traveled across time zones and you have jet lag, you don't exercise, or if you take certain medications. For an example, drinking alcohol. People think that drinking alcohol will help them sleep, but the truth is alcohol ruins your sleep. You may be a little drowsy, but as you metabolize it, your sleep gets totally ruined. Or certain medications, coffee. Some people, they drink coffee or they drink it late in the day, and they're a slow metabolizer, and then they can't go to sleep at night, caffeine. All of these things, if you're not careful, can affect and disrupt your circadian rhythm. Like Sister Tanya brought up, shift work, right? Or my shift work. Some nights when I work all night, the next day when I go to bed at my normal time, I feel in my body like I should be up at least another 2 or 3 hours. So even 1 or 2 days like that, and you start to get disrupted. And when you have these big changes in your routine, this is when your sleep gets disrupted. Another big thing, eating before bed. A big heavy meal. What did Ellen White say about a big heavy meal before bed? She says it's better to have it 3 hours before you go to sleep. Don't have a big heavy meal before you go to bed. These are all things that when you read in Healthful Living, you think, wow, I wonder if she's really true about this. She was far ahead of her time in some of her recommendations here. So, having disrupted our circadian rhythm or our sleep, it does affect our health. Like I said, if you are not sleeping regularly, you have an increased risk of death. Multiple studies. How do we die? Well, first of all, let's do short term. Let me talk about short term, then we'll talk about long term. Short term, you're fatigued. Everyone knows that whenever I've been working all night, I'm kind of grumpy. I'm fatigued, I'm grumpy, I'm short, because you just do not have the ability to deal with all the things of life, right? You have trouble concentrating. So you're doing things, you're not able to think exactly on the high level you should be, you're irritable. Memory loss is a very common thing. People who are chronically sleep deprived, we talk about memory loss and dementia, but even short-term memory, day to day, you forget all kinds of things. And then you don't even realize you forgot it because you lived through it. But just the long-term or short-term effects of sleep deprivation will do that. And here at the bottom I say death because of accident. There is a real toll in our society from what? People falling asleep at the wheel, right? Short-term loss, short-term sleep loss. They stayed up too late. They had to drive across the country. Well, I'll drive for 16 hours straight. There is a real cost to our society and to our families from sleep deprivation. So this doesn't have to be just something of worrying about long-term health effects. This is about being alive from day to day, from not having accidents, from not having lower alertness when you're at the wheel, or accidents at work if you work in a machine shop sort of area. In the long term, people who are sleep deprived, they tend to have higher blood pressure. They start to have insulin resistance, so they're more likely to have diabetes. And they're so stressed out because they're not sleeping that many of them start to get obesity. So how, brothers and sisters, can we optimize our circadian rhythm? Remember, regularity is key. So we have to stick to a schedule. Does anyone have a bedtime for themselves? What's your bedtime, Sister Maria? 8. So she has a time. Who here has another bedtime? It doesn't have to be 8. It could be 10. But there needs to be a time. Any volunteers? You have 24 hours? You have no bedtime. You just go. So this is good for you. As is for me. Yes, Gracie. 8:30 to 9. Okay, yeah, my bedtime is 9:30 to 10. Good. Who else has a bedtime? The kids have a bedtime. So a lot of these adults, they have no time. So who's telling you to go to sleep? What's telling you to go to sleep? Just when you're finally exhausted, huh? So to have a good night's sleep, you have to be reliable. Stick with a daily schedule. Pick a bedtime. If it's going to be 10, let it be 10. If it'll be 11, let it be 11. But it has to be a time. And then you have to have a wake-up time, right? If you choose to go to bed at midnight, okay, but you have to have a time that works for waking up. And it has to be pretty much the same all the time. So stick to a daily schedule. Focus on getting the 7 to 8 hours of sleep. During the day, go outside and get daylight. But when the nighttime comes in, turn the lights down. Especially our modern lights have LED. They have daylight imitating lights, which is a lot of blue. a lot of blue in the light, and that's what keeps your brain awake. So if you're going to have lights on, have more of the red shifted light, not the full daylight LED. So it's the warm light bulbs that you would buy in Home Depot. The warm light bulbs, not the daylight light bulbs. So at night, dim the lights, turn the lights down. Exercise is key. If you're exercised, you'll be tired. And then, so sleep regularly at times, eat regularly at times. Who has a breakfast time and a lunchtime and dinner time? Do we have times in our house? Gracie has time. She's a highly regimented woman. Good. Good. So we regiment our children. May God help us regiment ourselves. It's easy to regiment the children, but it's hard to regiment myself. So we must eat regularly. Did I miss something? No, I didn't. We must eat regularly. And then, of course, as we go to sleep, shut your phones off 2 hours before you go to bed. Don't take part in the distractions. Dim the lights. Get rid of the blue light. And hey, we're religious. Maybe you can focus on reading some spiritual Word of God rather than stimulating things like the news and all this crazy stuff. And brothers and sisters, how to regulate your circadian rhythm. Yeah, we've talked about it from a 24-hour viewpoint, but also there's another cycle that God put out there that's not just 24 hours, right? It's the cycle of 7 days, right? It was built at creation, and it's important today as well. Okay, the commemoration is for a day set aside, the seventh day to be set aside, for us to spend time in slumber and sleeping, not in sleeping, but a time where we can physically rest our mind and draw closer to God. So, in conclusion, science is getting closer. Science is supporting some of the things that Ellen White has brought up in the past. And my wish and prayer for each and every one of us in a high-paced age, we're in a very high-paced age where we're so focused, we're so overworked, overstimulated that, you know what, we can come apart and we can rededicate that third of our lives to the sleep that God has given us. Ellen White, Daughters of God, page 177 says, "Make it a habit not to sit up after 9 o'clock. Every light should be extinguished. This turning night into day is a wretched, health-destroying habit, and is reading too much. And this reading, much by brain workers, up to the sleep hours, is very injurious to the health. It calls the blood to the brain, and then there is restlessness and wakefulness, and the precious sleep that should rest the body does not come when desired." Does anyone have this problem? I've had it. Reading too much, too late, and in the end we have a fitful sleep or we cannot get to sleep. Here's another one. We all know this one. Manuscript Releases, page 224. She says, "Know from the testimonies given me from the time to time for brain workers." So she's saying people who use their brain a lot. I guess she's saying people who do cerebral things. Maybe, I don't know, lawyers, accountants, whatever. But this applies to everybody because we all use our brain, I would think. That, what does she say here? That sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. Sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. 2 hours of good sleep before 12 is worth more than 4 hours of sleep after 12. Brothers and sisters, let us focus. Let us focus our minds, focus our dedication to getting on the rhythm that God has designed for us. The mind does not wear out or break down so often on account of diligent employment and hard study as on the account of eating improper food at improper times. So not just eating healthy food whenever you want it. It's improper food and improper time. And careless attention to the laws of health. Diligent study is not the principal cause of the breaking down of the mental powers. The main cause is improper diet, irregular meals, the lack of physical exercise, and irregular hours of eating and sleeping. They sap the brain forces. May God help us. It's hard to be regular. It's hard to be regular, and it's hard to turn off when the whole world is continuously pulling us forward. So my wish and prayer for each and every one of us as we think about the Health Sabbath. We have actually a very health-oriented meal today that is all green. It's salad-based, right? May God help us as we have the salad powering our mind, that we can think of God's marvelous plan for us, that we can research, how can I make my life better? How can I sync myself with the rhythm that God has given to me? How can I have the sweet sleep of a laborer, as in Ecclesiastes 5:12? May God help us as we sync our rhythm to God's rhythm. One thing I would like to bring up here in conclusion. You see my sleep score here. Remember Ellen White says the hour or two before midnight is so much better? When is your deep sleep, brothers and sisters? It's all in the beginning. So when you put yourself out of rhythm, you're cutting huge sections of restorative sleep out of your life. May God help us as every night, like as Mahatma Gandhi said, what happened to him every night? He would go to sleep, and in the morning he would resurrect. So we do not have to sleep when we're dead. We can sleep now while we rest, and then be revitalized to be children and sons and daughters of God each and every day. This is my wish and prayer for all of us. At this time, let us close with our closing hymn, hymn number 27 in our church folders.